Tonight on Closer Look, last week's provincial budget finally answered the pleas of the craft cider industry for a tax playing field that is now level with craft beer makers. Collingwood Today reporter Chris Fell covered this story and joins us tonight to discuss it. Chris, let's start with why this announcement from last week's budget is a big deal for cider makers. What prompted the Ontario government to act on this tax issue now?
Well, I think it's part of a wave of support that we're seeing across both the province and the country for Canadian businesses and Canadian industries as we face these threats of tariffs and economic sanctions from President Donald Trump. And I think this just became the perfect time for the Ford government to jump in and act to support Ontario's craft cider makers. I mean, they are 100% an Ontario business and Ontario industry using Ontario products. And they weren't being taxed fairly, and it was hurting them. And this was the chance to jump in and do something about that.
Now,
and in a larger sense,
go ahead.
The Ford government has been modernizing the laws and the regulations around alcohol sales since they took office. And I'm guessing this was probably one of the things that was on the list as they work their way through it. So it's a great thing to see. And it supports Canada, which we're all doing right now.
Now, the Blue Mountains Council recently passed a resolution that asked the government to level the playing field. Was that the tipping point, Chris?
I'm not sure if that was the tipping point, but it sure didn't hurt. Blue Mountains Councillor Gail Ardell, she comes from the apple growing industry. One of her relatives has a cidery, Ardell Cidery, a great product if you're looking for one. And I know she was in the ear of many provincial politics. Gail has been in municipal government for many, many years, dating back 25 years to when I first started as a reporter. And I know she was speaking to ministers like Lisa Thompson and Rob Flack and Graydon Smith, as well as to MPPs like Brian Saunderson and Rick Byers. So she was a real loud voice on this one. And it was certainly important to have the town of the Blue Mountains, which is one of the top apple growing areas in Ontario, really taking the lead on this matter and really starting to make some noise about it. And I think that's something that probably caught the government's eye.
Now, what are the next steps for cider makers in the province to maximize the benefits of this tax change, Chris? Are there any additional regulatory hurdles that they still face?
Yeah, I know that the Ontario Craft Cider Association did tell its members that in the next budget, the province is planning to review its regulations and its rules on how products are delivered, which can be in a very, very expensive part of the process for the makers. So that's something that we'll have to wait and see on how that happens. That's coming down the road. As for the cider makers, the best way they can maximize this is grow and expand. I mean, the tax man is off their backs. Now they can get busy. They can ramp up their innovation. I'm sure there are many cider makers that have a lot of ideas for what they want to do and what they can do. And now they can get to work on them now that they know that this is out of their way and it's no longer going to be a problem.
Chris, was there anyone against this tax change? Any dissenting opinions or concerns, either from within the government or maybe other stakeholders?
I have not heard any negative comments about this change at all. I know the Ford government has received overall criticism. You know, we've heard people say they're focused on alcohol or whatever at the expense of other things. So you do hear generalized comments like that, but within the actual craft alcohol industry, if we could call it that, I know there are cider makers who make beer, who make wine, who make spirits, and they are all generally supportive of each other. You know, it's a tight-knit community, and I think they're supportive of each other for what's good for one is good for everybody else.
I guess the big question here, Chris, certainly from consumers, is how does it affect them? How might this tax change impact the pricing of craft cider for consumers at the LCBO and other retail channels?
Once the change is fully implemented, the cider makers will have a better understanding of where their expenses and where their costs are going, and then that will better inform them for their prices. But for what consumers should expect, you should expect more choices. You should expect more variety on the shelves. You might see new industry players coming into it. The handcuffs are off the craft cider makers. They can now get busy trying different things and innovating and coming up with different formulas. So this can be a real benefit to everybody, from the cider makers who are making and selling the product to the people who are buying it and enjoying it are going to see different things on the shelves that they're going to want to try out.
And that's a great segue, Chris, to our last question about the potential spin-offs related to this move. What kind of economic growth or job creation is expected in the cider industry as a result of the change, particularly in rural areas?
Oh, there are so many benefits to this down the road. It's going to be amazing. Once we see this fully implemented, as I mentioned earlier, Councillor Gail Ardell, she told me in New York State, the cider industry is $1 billion industry that employs a lot of people. And for rural areas, this can be a real game changer. We can see more agritourism. We'll see more people coming to visit, checking out cideries. Just this week, I wrote a story about Spy Cidery in town of the Blue Mountains is expanding. They're building a new building and they're going to expand their business. It's going to be more jobs in the cider industry, more innovation, more great products. And there's also tremendous benefits for the apple growers themselves. A thriving cider industry gives them more opportunities to sell their apples and to do new and different things. There are places in Europe where apples are grown specifically to be used to make ciders. I mean, that's now a possibility here as the cider industry begins to ramp up. You could see farmers setting aside acres of land that say, this is going to be for cider production. One of our cider growers has this great idea. One of our cider makers has this great idea. They're going to go with this and we're going to help them. So this change brings all kinds of possibilities. Really, the sky is the limit for the craft cider industry. And it's going to be really fun and interesting to watch over the next little while to see how it expands.
Yeah, sounds like great news. So cheers to that. There's Chris Fell from Collingwood Today reporting on tax breaks in the craft cider industry. That's all for Closer Look on this Friday. We'll be back Monday night at 7 with another episode for all of us at Village Media. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks for watching.